Welcome, everyone, to the Privacy Report. This is the show where we peel back the layers on how organizations protect or, well, sometimes fail to protect our sensitive digital lives.
That's right.
Today, we're going to move well beyond, simple firewalls. We're looking at the centralized intelligence system that tries to make sense of that overwhelming flood of digital activity.
We're talking about the critical layer that spots a threat that's already inside your network.
Exactly. For organizations dealing with massive volumes of data, customer records, financials, intellectual property relying on standalone security tools, it's really a losing game.
It is. We're talking about security information and event management, or SIEM, as you'll hear it called.
Yeah.
It's sort of the brain that connects all these disparate pieces of evidence to tell a story about a threat in real time.
And if you're managing any kind of complex digital infrastructure, SIEM has really evolved from a niche tool into an absolute necessity. So today we're going to get into how it works, why it's so central to modern compliance, and what challenges organizations face trying to make it all work.
And we'll be discussing how this system handles everything from log ingestion latency to more sophisticated techniques like user and entity behavior analytics, and why just implementing it forces companies to really confront their own data collection policies.
Okay, before we jump into all of that, if you want deeper analysis and custom reports from our team sent straight to your inbox, make sure you subscribe to our email newsletter. You can find that at theprivacyreport.net. So let's get started. Most people, I think, get the basic idea that SIEM collects logs.
Right.
But just collecting logs from a server, a firewall, and, say, a cloud application, that just creates this chaotic mix of formats and timelines. So what is the fundamental strategic difficulty that a SIEM has to solve right out of the gate?
The difficulty is standardization, but at a massive scale. We call this normalization. Normalization?
Yeah. Imagine collecting millions, maybe billions of events a day. One system might report a login event as code 50. Another one calls it user login success.
I see, so completely different languages.
Exactly. And if your security analyst has to manually translate these across dozens of systems, they've already lost the battle. The attacker's long gone.
So SIEM's first job is basically translating everything into a consistent language so you can actually start connecting the dots.
Precisely. And once it's normalized, the data is enriched. We'd add context, like who is this user? Where do they normally log in from? What system did they access?
Okay.
Then comes the crucial step, correlation. This is where the platform moves beyond just simple rule matching. It's looking for a chain of events that, individually might look harmless, but together they scream intrusion.
I'd push back a little on the idea that correlation is easy. Attackers today, they often look exactly like authorized users. How does a SIEM truly tell the difference between a sysadmin legitimately accessing a server and a bad actor who's stolen those credentials? That is the pivot point. It's the difference between what we'd call traditional SIEM and modern SIEM, and it's where advanced techniques like user and entity behavior analytics, or UEBA, come into play.
UEB.
So instead of just relying on static rules like 3 failed logins equals an alert UEBA profiles baseline behavior, it learns what's normal
For a specific person.
for that specific person or that specific server. It looks for anomalies in that user's pattern. For instance, your system admin usually logs in from HQ in New York at 8 a.m.
Right.
But if that same admin account suddenly logs in from a totally new IP address in Eastern Europe at 2 a.m. and immediately accesses a critical HR database they never touch, the SIEM detects that behavioral shift.
And it flags it with high confidence because it's so far outside the established norm.
Exactly.
That's fascinating because it means the SIEM is constantly learning what normal looks like. That makes it a much more effective guard against, say, insider threats or those lateral movement attacks where the attacker is already past the perimeter.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And we see this reference all the time in threat analysis frameworks like IDRI, ATT, and CK. The ability to detect lateral movement, privilege escalation, reconnaissance. These are all typical post-intrusion activities. And detecting them hinges entirely on the SIEM's ability to correlate logs from endpoints, identity systems, and network flows all at the same time.
It's the central evidence layer.
It's what CISA and other agencies recommend for any kind of mature defense.
So let's pivot here because this is really the core of what we talk about on this show. We have this technical security system, but how does the need for centralized logging and continuous monitoring impact digital rights and privacy? I mean, on the surface, they seem inherently contradictory.
They are definitely two sides of a very complex equation.
Yeah.
But a SIEM can offer profound privacy benefits if it's implemented correctly.
Okay, how so? so?
Well, the obvious benefit is speed. The faster you detect unauthorized data access or a breach, the quicker you can mitigate the damage to people's personal data. That fulfills a core obligation under regulations like GDPR or CCPA.
So it's the ultimate accountability tool. It shows who accessed what data and when, which is obviously crucial for incident response and regulatory reporting.
Absolutely. But there's a second, more strategic benefit,
Mm.
and it has to do with data minimization.
Right. The principle of only collecting what you need.
Exactly. An effective SIEM deployment forces an organization to be highly deliberate about its log collection strategy. They can't just, turn on the fire hose and collect everything.
Wait, why not? I mean,
And
if you collect everything, surely you maximize your chance of catching the bad guy, right?
you maximize noise, cost, and liability. When you collect every single interaction, every mouse click, every internal email header, every non-critical database query, you're creating massive volumes of sensitive data that now you have to store securely, analyze, and retain.
Ah, so the tension arises right there.
Yes, privacy regulations mandate data minimization. So if a company logs more data than is strictly necessary for security or business operations, they're creating unnecessary privacy risk and, frankly, exposing themselves to liability.
So the very act of setting up the SIEM forces an internal audit. It makes teams ask, do we actually need this data? And is the security benefit worth the compliance cost and privacy risk of storing it for, say, 12 months?
It forces accountability and clarity around data flows. And you have to consider audit trails. GDPR and other frameworks require very specific capabilities for logging and reporting misuse. So that long-term storage is essential for proving to auditors that you have continuous oversight.
That leads me right to the practical hurdles. For someone listening who's thinking about implementation, what are, say, 3 most formidable challenges organizations face when they try to operationalize a SIEM?
Number one is always noise reduction. A big SIEM implementation can generate millions of alerts. And if 99% of them are false positives, just system noise, your analysts get alert fatigue.
Yeah.
They just start ignoring everything.
That sounds like trying to find a whispered threat in the middle of a packed, noisy data center. It must just consume a massive amount of analyst time.
It does. And that ties right into challenge number 2,
Yeah.
cost and scale. The cost model for SIEM is often based on the volume of data you ingest per day. So if you ingest 10 terabytes a day, you're paying significantly more than if you ingest 1 terabyte. And this forces some really difficult strategic choices.
Like, are we going to log non-critical application data or save that capacity for high-value network traffic logs?
Exactly that.
So speaking of cost, is this strictly an enterprise solution then? Is it even realistic for smaller organizations that still hold critical data but don't have these huge security operation centers?
Well, the landscape has changed. 10 years ago, a self-hosted on-premise SIEM was prohibitively expensive for most teams.
Sure.
Today, modern cloud-based SIEM solutions and open-source stacks have significantly reduced that barrier to entry. They offer elasticity and shift the operational burden.
So you can scale up and down quickly.
Right. It makes it feasible for smaller orgs to get the visibility they need without a massive upfront capital investment.
That comparison on-prem versus cloud is key. If an organization does go with a cloud model, how does the SIEM interact with security tools they already have, like endpoint protection? Does it replace them?
Oh, absolutely not. A SIEM acts as the central aggregator and brain.
Mm.
It relies on those existing tools, the endpoint protection, firewalls, identity providers, to be its eyes and ears.
I see.
So endpoint protection gives you that immediate localized defense and the first alert. The SIEM then takes that alert and combines it with network flow data and cloud audit logs to figure out if that one localized event is actually part of a much larger coordinated campaign.
It's the connective tissue.
That's a great way to put it.
Before we move on, let's clarify another point of confusion I hear a lot. The difference between SIEM and SOAR, because modern platforms seem to be blurring that line.
That is a great distinction to make. Historically, a SIEM's job ends at the alert. It detects, it correlates, and it notifies an analyst.
Okay.
SOAR, which stands for Security Orchestration, Automation, and Response, takes over at that point.
So it's the what next?
Exactly. SOAR's function is to automate the steps that come after detection. So for instance, if the SIEM alerts on a highly suspicious malware infection, the SOAR platform might automatically isolate the machine, block the IP address at the firewall, and open a ticket, all without a human touching it.
So SIEM tells you what is happening, and SOAR executes the predefined playbook for how to respond.
You've got it. And while many big vendors now offer combined platforms, it's really vital to understand that functional separation. Automation is powerful, but it also carries risk. A poorly configured SOAR playbook could automatically shut down critical business functions based on one noisy alert.
The complexity just increases exponentially when you add that R for response.
It really does.
Okay, so for the listener who is now ready to maybe explore some solutions, what are some of the heavy-hitting, robust tools out there that reflect the different approaches we've talked about?
We see a few leaders in the space. Splunk Enterprise Security is still a very mature, powerful option, especially for organizations that need highly customizable analytics and already handle massive data sets.
Right, the big player.
For those who favor more flexibility and maybe an open architecture, Elastic Security is incredibly popular. It's often used by teams that prefer to self-host and scale on their own terms.
And what about the newer sort of cloud-native players?
So you have tools like CrowdStrike Falcon LogScale, which is really focused on speed and integration with cloud environments. It's tailored for rapid, large-scale threat hunting. The right tool really depends on the organization's existing tech stack and their in-house skill set.
So based on all the complexity we've covered, the cost, the noise, the compliance headaches, what is the single most critical first step an organization needs to take before signing a contract or deploying a single agent?
It sounds a little boring, but the most actionable takeaway here is the absolute necessity of a rigorous log readiness consultation.
A log readiness consultation.
Yes. Before you deploy anything, the security team and the privacy team have to sit down and formally agree on the data collection policy. They have to determine precisely what specific data points they should and should not collect to meet both the security mandate and the privacy mandate for data minimization.
And if you skip that step,
You guarantee alert fatigue, massive unnecessary cost, and a huge increase in liability.
if we connect this back to the bigger picture, it seems like a SIEM doesn't just solve a security problem, it really forces organizations to solve an internal data governance problem first.
It does. I mean, given that SIEM forces you to look critically at all the data you're collecting, the ultimate challenge for digital rights and privacy teams isn't just protecting the data once it's in the SIEM.
It's something bigger.
It's using this powerful tool to ask the fundamental question, why are we even collecting this data in the first place?
Yeah.
If you can reduce the footprint of what you collect, you inherently reduce your risk profile. And that makes the security tools you do deploy much more effective.
That focus on foundational data collection, the minimization principle, that is a conversation every organization needs to have before investing in massive security infrastructure.
Thank you for walking us through that. That was incredibly insightful.
My pleasure. It's a complex area, but it's absolutely crucial for modern privacy protections.
And thank you, listener, for tuning into this analysis of security information and event management. We hope this exploration gave you some clarity and depth on a really complex security topic.
We appreciate you joining us here on the Privacy Report.
Remember to like and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your audio content. This episode was made with the assistance of AI.